My name is Sheridan Ames. I'm 34 years old. I don't talk about this day often, but I remember every breath of it. She still plays karate in her pajamas. My brother Aaron says it loud enough for the entire hangar to hear. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. We're standing inside the old Airfield Museum in San Angelo, Texas. Retired planes hang from cables above us, rusted wings frozen in flight. Sunlight filters through the glass ceiling like a spotlight on my shame. The insult lands soft but spreads like smoke. I feel people glance over their shoulders, then quickly look away. My nephew shifts awkwardly in his ROTC uniform. Someone from the logistics team coughs. Aaron is grinning. My older brother, the golden boy who never outgrew high school. We're gathered here for a private family event, my cousin's commissioning ceremony. Aaron always finds a way to speak over it. His words echo through the hangar. I'm just the black belt little sister, still single, still doing her weird martial arts thing, still ignored. I glance toward the back exit just as a camouflaged figure steps off the tarmac. The air stills, and then the museum's loudspeakers cut out mid-anthem. The silence feels engineered, like it's choosing sides. No one says anything. Not my mother, not my cousins, not even the senior ROTC staff seated in the front row. Aaron chuckles once and leans in. I mean, seriously. She still trains like she's 12. 4 black belts. What's next? Kicking ghosts. My palms stay at my sides. I press my thumb against the pad of my index finger. A silent breath in. My stance doesn't change. They think they know me. They think I'm here for the cake and the discomfort. But something outside has shifted, because the man in fatigues who just stepped off the incoming chopper isn't just any officer. His shoulder bears a recon patch, silver pin, 3 stars under his nameplate, and he's walking this way. The slow squeak of his boots echoes through the hangar. Aaron turns halfway to glance. Still amused, still proud of his audience. I step back just half a step to clear the direct line. Not out of fear, out of instinct. You don't block a Recon Colonel's path, especially not one who lands unannounced. The man walks with purpose, not noise. No entourage, no clipboard, no advance salute, just wind sweat and years in his stride. My cousin seated on stage stiffens. He's noticed. Others are rising subtly unsure whether to stand or stay seated. The colonel stops 5 feet from me. He doesn't look at Aaron. He looks straight at me and says calmly, clearly, "We need her." Aaron actually laughs. A short bark. Need who Sheridan? Come on, Colonel, she does jujitsu in the garage. The colonel doesn't flinch. He shifts his weight, tilts his head just slightly the way you only see in men who've operated beyond borders. Then he turns to me. Ma'am, permission to speak freely. And for the first time in years, I let my voice break the silence. Granted, the moment breaks like glass. My mother stares like she's seeing me for the first time. The ROTC major's hand goes to his cap. Even the logistics officer who until now had been chewing gum stands ramrod straight. Aaron doesn't get it. He's looking around confused, defensive. She's not even enlisted, she's just... But the colonel isn't listening. Ma'am, he says again, your transport's wheels down. Asset confirmation required before extraction. I nod. Just once. The colonel clicks his comm once. That's her. Confirmed. All units hold perimeter. And then, no applause. No salute. Just a quiet moment as he steps aside and waits. For me. No one moves. I walk past Aaron without a word. He doesn't stop me. Doesn't speak. Behind me, I hear someone whisper, "Sir, she's the Black Ops consultant." Someone else murmurs they call her Spectre. But I don't stop to explain, because this isn't the time for that. It never was. I reach the open tarmac doors. The chopper blades are still spinning. Beyond them, a world they never saw coming. And that was the moment they finally looked at me. Not like a sister, not like a hobbyist, not like a joke, but like something they couldn't name. The ceremony continued. Without me. Without Aaron's jokes. Without their comfort. I didn't turn back, because this time they were the ones left standing still. I wish I could say the mockery stopped after that family dinner. But it didn't. The joke caught on. A week later, my older brother Shane dropped by my apartment unannounced. He said he was checking in, but I knew better. He wanted to size me up. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, scanning my small training space like it was a child's toy box. "You're still doing that? Whatever it is." "Tai Chi yoga with flair," he smirked. I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy. He walked around the mats, tapping the Bakken sword I kept mounted on the wall. This one time in Iraq, he started like always. Our CO had a guy who practiced something like this. Called himself a martial artist. Never did anything real with it. We used to laugh behind his back. Guy ended up running logistics or something. I let him ramble. I knew he wasn't here for a real conversation. Shane always used stories to remind me where he thought the line between real and fake was drawn and where he placed me. On the wrong side. You could have joined something real Kara, ROTC, officer school, something where people salute you instead of bow politely in a dojo. Then he saw the framed photo on the shelf. The one of me in Okinawa with my 5th-degree sensei. We stood side by side, both in GI barefoot on the wood. It was one of the proudest days of my life. Shane picked it up, turned it slightly toward me. "This is cute, but you know real soldiers don't earn belts. They earn scars." He left without saying goodbye. I sat down on the mat after he walked out. I ran a hand over my bare feet, grounding myself. The silence in my apartment, once calming, now echoed too loudly. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the same question over and over. Why do I keep letting this get to me? Because it wasn't just Shane. The ridicule spread through the family like wildfire, always hidden beneath chuckles, sideways glances, innocent-sounding questions at Thanksgiving. "So, Kara, do you get paid for this martial arts thing? Aren't you worried you'll get hurt at your age? Does anyone actually use those belts outside of movies? And my favorite, you were so smart growing up. You could have done anything. Why this?" My aunt once patted my arm like I was ill and said, "It's okay, sweetie. We all need our little passions." As if all the hours I'd trained the tournaments, I'd won the broken ribs, the pulled muscles, the meditation, the discipline, it was all just a little passion, a side hobby, a decorative feather in my otherwise unfulfilled life. I stopped bringing up my work. I stopped correcting them when they said karate instead of kenjutsu. I stopped showing pictures of my students or stories from my travels to Japan, Korea, or the Philippines. Every correction felt like I was begging for validation. I hated how small that made me feel. But even more than the comments, what hurt was the silence. The silence when I got published in a major martial arts journal, no one responded. The silence when I qualified for a national demonstration team, no one came to see. The silence when I earned my 4th belt and sent a message to my family group chat, only my cousin Becky replied, "Cool." I began to wonder if they'd ever even cared about who I was, or only ever about who I could have been. Sometimes I'd stand alone in the middle of my studio, lights dimmed, and just breathe. Slowly, deeply, the floor beneath my feet, familiar, trustworthy. I'd close my eyes and remember my sensei's voice in Okinawa. "Your power does not need to be loud to be real." But lately, even that voice felt far away. I started skipping gatherings, declined dinners. I trained harder longer. I bruised my knuckles more than once, hitting the makiwara too hard, as if punishing myself for not being enough, for not being what they expected. One weekend, I flew to a tactical training conference hosted by a military-private partnership program. A friend in defense contracting had referred me, saying they were exploring close-quarters innovations and unorthodox human movement. I ran a breakout session on hybridized blade training. A quiet, curious colonel sat in the back the entire time, said nothing, just watched. When I was done, he approached and asked, "Where did you learn this fusion form?" I told him briefly. "Okinawa, Nara, Manila. Years of deep study, silent halls, stone floors, bamboo staffs." He didn't smile, he didn't nod. He simply said, "It's efficient, brutal. You command well." I blinked. It was the most validation I'd received in months. "Would you ever be interested in consulting on applied training for small recon teams?" he asked, matter of fact. Yes. Of course. He handed me a card. No unit name. Just a number and an insignia I didn't recognize. That night, back in my hotel room, I stared at that card for an hour. It didn't erase Shane's voice or my mother's sighs or Aunt Linda's little passion comment. But it was something else. A quiet door opening. Something real. I tucked the card into my wallet behind my license. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. They wouldn't understand. But I did. I wasn't lost. I was building. Quietly. Brick by brick. Belt by belt. And maybe someday I wouldn't need them to see it. Maybe the right people already did. I was never good at yelling back. Some people can meet cruelty with fire. But me, I just stood there quiet, taking the hits like a rock in the tide. Until one day, I didn't. It started small. So small, I didn't realize the shift had already begun. I was 28 when I moved out for good. Not just from the house, but from the emotional orbit my family had kept me in since childhood. I found a small place 3 towns over. Clean, quiet, with enough space to hang my belts, roll out a mat, and breathe without being asked. Still doing your little kicks by my brother. Marcus had always been the loudest, and because he was the loudest, people assumed he was right. It took me years to learn that volume didn't equal truth, and that silence didn't mean weakness. At night, I'd run drills until my muscles ached. Not because I had something to prove to him, but because movement made me feel like I existed. Each strike I threw, each form I perfected, it reminded me I had weight, intention, a voice. Even if that voice didn't always come in words. One night after training, I stared at the 4 black belts I had earned over the years: Shotokan, Hapkido, BJJ, and Krav Maga. Different disciplines, different routes, but they all taught the same principle: know your center, and nothing can move you without your permission. That night, I knew. I wasn't training anymore just for self-discipline. I was preparing. I started volunteering at a women's self-defense workshop downtown. Twice a week, I taught women how to get out of holds, break grips, and shout with conviction. Some were survivors. Some were just tired of walking in fear. Most came in with their shoulders hunched, apologizing for taking up space. I saw myself in all of them. Then one night, a woman named Callie stayed after class. She looked at me not just like I was a teacher, but like I was something rare. "You move like you're listening to something the rest of us can't hear," she said. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled. That same week, I got a call I never expected from a former Krav instructor I'd trained under years ago. She was helping consult for a private military contractor working with recon units. Not soldiers exactly. Not mercenaries either. They were developing a hybrid hand-to-hand curriculum for field adaptability, low-visibility, high-pressure environments. No uniforms, no noise. They needed someone who could blend someone with multidiscipline experience, low profile, and calm under pressure. She said my name came up, twice. I met the team in a warehouse on the outskirts of Fort Carson. Clean mats, no insignias, and an eerie silence that reminded me more of meditation halls than any military facility. They didn't care about my resume. They wanted to see me move. I did a flow across the mat, striking grappling transitions, pressure point redirects. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My body did the talking. When I finished, a man in a plain gray shirt, clearly the leader, nodded once. "You're in." That moment shifted something deep inside me. They didn't ask where I studied, didn't ask what my family thought, didn't ask how many followers I had on social media or if I had something more stable. They just saw what I could do, and that was enough. For the next 6 months, I trained quietly with their unit, integrating movements into high-stress field scenarios. I worked on timing, silence, breath control under strain. It was the quietest environment I'd ever been in, and also the most validating. They called me Whisper, because I never needed to raise my voice to be heard. Back home, my family still thought I was teaching kids how to punch rubber dummies in a gym somewhere. At Christmas, Marcus handed me a pink yoga mat and said, "So you can keep stretching your hobbies." I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Thanks," because when you stop needing them to see you, their words lose their teeth. Still, something in me longed for them to witness, not to approve, but to realize. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted silence, the kind that falls when truth walks into the room. Then one day it came. We got word of a demonstration happening overseas high-level observers, including NATO and Eastern European defense ministers. Our recon unit would be showcasing adaptive fieldwork to selected partners. My role wasn't to perform, but to demonstrate methods with a local partner for translation and integration. I packed light. What I didn't know was that the event would be broadcast internally to select families of U.S. recon contributors as part of a rare transparency initiative, which included mine. I learned that fact the day before deployment in a quiet briefing room. I nodded, didn't ask questions. I'd spent years preparing my body. That week, I began preparing my mind, because soon the people who had mocked me would witness the quiet force I had become, whether they believed it or not, and I would not say a word. There's something about family laughter that doesn't just echo at cuts. That winter, just after Christmas, we had another family gathering at Aunt Linda's home. She insisted on hosting as always. Her massive colonial house was the chosen arena for her subtle power plays, each perfectly presented tray of canapés, each framed certificate of her son's achievements displayed like war medals. The woman curated moments like she curated her reputation. I arrived late. Warsaw had just sent me the latest clearance documents to review for a tech proposal. I barely had time to change. When I stepped into the living room, the conversation stalled for a brief second, then resumed, like I was just part of the background noise. I kissed my mom on the cheek. She smelled like her favorite vanilla lotion. She smiled thinly, then glanced around nervously, almost embarrassed to be caught talking to me. Aunt Linda was mid-story something about her daughter's internship at some media agency in Chicago. And of course, Linda said, twirling her wine glass, they offered her a full-time job right after, because talent doesn't go unnoticed. A few heads nodded. I took a seat in the corner, placing my purse by my feet. That's when Uncle Greg chimed in. "And how's your little, what do you call it, Project Marissa?" Still tinkering in the garage, I looked up. "My lab's in Warsaw now," I replied, calm, neutral. "We're finalizing a new AI-based threat assessment grid. It's being considered for international deployment." There was a pause. And then laughter. Not all-out mockery. Worse. That polite, indulgent chuckle that people reserve for someone who thinks they're important when they're not. Aunt Linda sipped her wine. "Warsaw, interesting place for a hobby." That word again. Hobby. It echoed in my ribs. "I wouldn't call 12 defense patents a hobby," I said quieter than I meant. "Oh, Marissa," she cooed, "you're so passionate. But it's not like anyone really uses those things, right? Like, in real life," I wanted to say. "Actually, a NATO-affiliated test range just deployed one of my sensor models. I wanted to say 2 of my patents are classified and used in cross-border surveillance, but I didn't. Because they didn't want facts. They wanted the old story, the narrative that made them feel better about my difference. That I was strange, brilliant maybe, but ultimately irrelevant. Harmless." Mom laughed lightly beside her sister. "Well, as long as she's happy, right?" That hit harder than I expected. I turned to look at her. She didn't meet my eyes. I hadn't driven all night just to be a footnote in their conversations. I hadn't stayed up for weeks calibrating neural feedback loops just to be reduced to still tinkering. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched their conversations continue. About jobs children who bought a second home who didn't. They lived in a small world that rewarded predictability, not innovation. Comfort, not impact. Later that evening, I stepped outside onto the porch. Snow was falling soft and soundless. I leaned on the railing, exhaling a long cloud into the cold. My cousin Jamie came out a moment later. He was one of the few who didn't talk much. A quiet accountant, more observer than participant. He handed me a mug of cocoa. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. He stood beside me in silence for a bit, then said, "You know, one day someone's going to walk in and see you, and when they do, they'll make them see you too." I looked at him. He didn't smile. Just meant it. "They'll freeze," he added. "Like statues." I didn't reply, but I remembered that moment. I remember the snow melting in my hair and his words sinking in like warmth. That night when I drove home, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just decided. No more explaining, no more justifying. I would let my work speak in places where their voices couldn't reach. Let them laugh. One day they wouldn't. I stopped trying to make them understand. After that night on Aunt Linda's porch, after Jamie's quiet words sank in, I returned to Warsaw with a strange kind of peace in my chest. Not comfort, not resolution, just clarity. They didn't have to believe in me. They didn't have to respect what they couldn't comprehend. Because the right people already did. And more importantly, some very important people were about to. My work with the Polish Defense Unit had been progressing in a direction even I hadn't fully anticipated. What began as a limited-use threat detection protocol for refugee corridor security had evolved into something broader, something bigger. We had streamlined pattern recognition to the point where our system could predict low-scale political sabotage with over 89% accuracy. No one else had achieved that. One afternoon in January, I received a strange email from a .gov domain I didn't recognize. It was short, direct, and carefully worded. Your signal processing and blind data mapping patent, 22187 GD, caught the attention of a ministerial advisor. We would like to schedule a quiet briefing. That was all it said. I read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Colonel Liska, the Polish military attaché, who had been overseeing my work for the past 6 months. 20 minutes later, he called me directly. You will take that meeting, he said. Don't ask me anything else. Just show up, professionally. Quietly. I did. The briefing took place in a government annex building 2 hours south of Warsaw. The room was cold, sterile, and oddly empty. Only 4 people were present, 2 in suits, 1 in military dress, and 1 woman in civilian attire who didn't speak at all but watched everything. Her eyes felt like a scanner. They didn't ask about how I came up with my models. They asked where else I had tested them, what I could modify, whether I could build a ghost protocol, an undetectable layer over existing NATO systems. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said. If I have direct access to the frame? There was silence. One of the suits leaned back in his chair. We may have need of someone like you, he said. But it will come suddenly. You won't be briefed the traditional way. Do you understand? I nodded once. He gave the smallest smile. That's why they laughed at you, isn't it? I blinked. Because you were always doing work for people who hadn't arrived yet. I never learned his name. That meeting shifted something inside me. Not just professionally, but in how I carried myself after. I returned to my Warsaw flat that evening and laid out every design, every schema, every rejected model that no Western academic circle had cared for. I reviewed them like blueprints to my own resilience. I stayed up for 26 hours straight, polishing, cross-referencing, annotating with laser precision. If someone was watching, I wanted to be ready. The call came 3 weeks later, from an unlisted Polish number. The voice on the other end was clipped serious. You're requested for diplomatic escort. Dress code is formal. Location is not to be disclosed. An SUV will arrive at 17 Cesuro. I asked nothing. Just answered confirmed. And when that SUV pulled up later that day, exactly on time, I was waiting in a black wool coat and a matte leather case filled with my protocols. The driver never spoke. But when I glanced at the dashboard, I saw a clearance badge with a tiny Polish defense seal and a NATO cross overlay. We drove for nearly an hour through winding rural roads. The sky was pale muted gold leaking into gray. At last, we reached what looked like an abandoned airfield, a long stretch of concrete flanked by temporary shelters, and one long, dark SUV parked alone at the edge. 2 guards motioned me forward. I stepped out, heels clicking against the cold tarmac coat pulled tight around me. A woman stepped out of the SUV, tall, sharp, wearing a coat with a distinct insignia. She looked at me for a beat. You're the American, she said. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. Good. You're being briefed directly. Minister's orders. And just like that, she turned and motioned me toward a portable command unit at the far end of the field. Inside, I was handed a secure tablet and shown one word on the screen: alert test. No files, no signature. Just the instruction. I'm ready, I said. And I was. In those moments, I realized all the years of being underestimated weren't wasted. They had insulated me. They had trained me to work in silence, to build in the dark, to execute without needing applause. My family. They weren't my judges. They were just early bystanders to a story they weren't equipped to follow, and now I wasn't building for them. I was building despite them. I didn't need their praise. I didn't even need their understanding. I just needed to keep walking forward into the room, into the silence, into the classified meeting. Because what came next would no longer be whispered in mockery. It would be whispered in reverence. I hadn't expected the minister to arrive in person. That was never part of the agenda I'd received. The ballroom in Warsaw was already a hum of polished shoes and diplomatic nods when I stepped in. Rows of dignitaries from various NATO allies, top brass in sharply pressed uniforms, and defense tech moguls gathered under golden chandeliers. Somewhere across the vast room, I caught a glimpse of the American ambassador whispering something to the Polish security chief. But my heart wasn't racing from nerves anymore. I had already passed the point of hoping they'd see me. I was here to witness something for myself. As I stood waiting near the main stage, a quiet murmur rippled from the side entrance. It was subtle, just a shift in posture, a collective breath being held. I turned slightly, and that's when I saw him. The Polish Minister of National Defense stepped into the hall, but he didn't walk with ceremony or grandiosity. He walked with quiet purpose, ignoring the applause that cautiously began around him. He wore a sharp, dark suit, no medals, no unnecessary flair, only gravity. He didn't stop at the front row. He didn't go to the stage. He walked straight toward me. It was one of those moments where time stretches not dramatically, not in the way movies do, but in the way real life does when your body knows something significant is happening before your mind catches up. He came to a stop in front of me, right in front of my plain black dress and calm face. The crowd quieted. I wasn't sure they were even breathing. Then the minister bowed his head, not dramatically, not ceremoniously, just respectfully. Genuinely. He looked me in the eye and said in English, but with a soft Polish accent, "Dr. Coyle, your contributions have already saved lives we'll never be able to name. Poland thanks you, Europe thanks you." I swallowed. Behind me, I felt the burn of Aunt Linda's silence. She had followed me in just moments earlier, likely still riding the disbelief that I was the Marissa on the printed program. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. All I said was, "Thank you, Minister." He offered a single nod, then turned to the others and said simply, "You've invited many inventors here tonight, but this one changes everything." And just like that, he left. But something stayed. A weight had shifted in the room. The kind of shift that didn't clang or crash, it simply landed. Soft, but irreversible. I walked up to the stage shortly after. My name was called Dr. Marissa Coyle for excellence in defense innovation and international collaboration. Applause followed, but I wasn't focused on that. My eyes scanned the back corner of the room. Aunt Linda had sat down quietly. She wasn't talking. She wasn't shaking her head or whispering to my mother. She was just watching. Frozen. I accepted the plaque, posed briefly for a photo with the ambassador, and returned to my seat. Every step back down those stairs felt like grounding, like I was walking deeper into the self I'd always known I was. For years, I'd tried to explain my work, how each patent connected to another, how the logic structures I'd written were built to protect lives in real-world conflicts. I tried explaining why it mattered that I stayed up till 3 a.m. in a freezing lab coding neural response frameworks for multi-agent autonomous vehicles, but they only ever heard hobby. Now, they didn't say a word. Later that evening, a woman in a dark navy uniform, a colonel judging by the insignia, approached my table. She was French, with sharp features and kind eyes. She said simply, "When the Admiral read your name in this year's report," he paused. "That doesn't happen often. What you've built is being implemented next quarter. Quietly, but decisively." Another nod, another salute. Quiet, powerful. And just like that, she disappeared into the crowd again. By the time the dessert was served, I wasn't even hungry. My stomach wasn't full of nerves, it was full of clarity. And something else. Peace. I didn't speak to Aunt Linda the rest of the evening. She never approached me. She left early, her heels clicking too fast against the marble floor as if she needed to get away from what she had just witnessed. And my mother. She lingered near the exit, holding a glass of untouched wine. When I passed by, she opened her mouth as if to say something, but she didn't. For once in her life, she didn't know what to say. And I didn't offer her a lifeline. I didn't need her to understand me anymore. I had spent years chasing approval that was always shrinking in the mirror. What I'd found instead in late nights' deep focus and persistent belief was something better. Self-respect. I didn't look back. I didn't soften my step. I just walked out of that ballroom into the Warsaw night, a city of lights glowing quietly around me. Let them talk later. Let them try to process what they saw. Let them wonder how they never noticed what was in front of them all along. Because in that moment, I had nothing left to prove, and everything ahead of me. I didn't sleep the night after the Warsaw event. Not because I was overwhelmed or afraid, but because something in me had finally gone still. For the first time in my adult life, the need to prove myself to family, to critics, to the echo of every mocking voice I'd endured was gone. I stood by the tall window of the hotel suite watching the sunrise spill gold across the city. My reflection hovered in the glass, not the quiet, unsure girl from Tennessee, but a woman who had earned her place on merit, on integrity, on grit. I hadn't said anything to my family after the moment with the minister. Didn't need to. They'd watched him bow, they'd watched the room stand, and they'd watched me nod once and walk away. Linda hadn't spoken a word after. Not one. Back in the U.S., there was silence for days. No texts, no backhanded comments, just absence. And it was peaceful. I went back to my lab. The team greeted me like I'd never left no fuss, no drama, just respect. I liked it that way. There, I wasn't the girl with 12 patents. I was the mind behind our next breakthrough. We were working on drone mesh coordination systems for emergency response tech that could save thousands of lives in war zones and natural disasters. Real work, real stakes, and I loved it. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope. It was from my mom. Inside was a short note. Your grandmother would have been proud. So am I. No signature, no embellishment. I sat with it in my hand for a long while. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumph. Just a small, clean sense of closure. She wasn't trying to take credit, wasn't asking for forgiveness. Just a sentence. A sentence I'd waited years to hear. But the truth, I didn't need it anymore. I'd already found my peace. That weekend, I got invited to speak at the Global Tech Women's Summit in Zurich. They wanted me to give a keynote on silent breakthroughs leading without needing the spotlight. I said yes. Not for the attention, but for the young women who might be sitting where I once was, doubted, dismissed, overlooked. Maybe they'd hear something in my voice that reminded them they weren't wrong to keep going, that they didn't need noise to be powerful, just precision and patience. I wore the same black suit I'd worn in Warsaw. No jewelry, no script. I walked on stage, looked at the sea of expectant faces, and began quietly. I was told for years my work was a hobby, I said. By people who loved me, by people who should have known better. The room went still. I told them the truth, not the public version, not the media-polished story. Just how it felt to build something brilliant and be met with condescension. How it felt to keep going anyway. How it felt when someone finally saw it and didn't hesitate to salute it. And how I realized in that moment that I never actually needed their praise. Just my own belief. After the speech, a young woman approached me. Her eyes were glassy voice trembling. They told me engineering was for men, she whispered, but I just got my first patent published. Your talk, she paused. Your talk made me feel like I'm not alone. I smiled and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not. Back in the U.S., things were different. The next family gathering was subdued. They'd seen the photo by then, me standing beside the Polish defense minister, the small bow, the salute in the background. It had gone viral in defense circles. Someone had added the caption, "She didn't say a word." She didn't have to. Linda didn't meet my eyes that day. She didn't need to. I wasn't angry anymore. I had outgrown her judgment like an old coat. When she reached for the deviled eggs, her hand trembled slightly. I passed them to her without a word. Kindness can be a quiet kind of power, too. Later that night, my younger cousin pulled me aside. Her voice was hesitant. "Aunt Marissa, can I ask you something?" I blinked. "Aunt, sure," I said. "I'm applying to Caltech. Everyone says it's too ambitious. But do you think I should—" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Her face lit up like she'd been waiting years for someone to say that. So had I once. As I left that evening, my mother hugged me tighter than she ever had before. "You were always right to keep going," she murmured. Again, I didn't cry. I just smiled and stepped into the night, because I had finally arrived at the one place I thought I needed their permission to reach myself, standing steady, without applause, without permission, without a word, and in that silence I stood tall, and they finally understood.